Today's episode of Heads and Tails is with Will Campbell, the Australian founding head of Franklin School in New York City. Will is doing all sorts of entrepreneurial things with a blank canvas and operating a school that is at half the price of its competitors. We cover the US education system more broadly, and Will has some fantastic advice for parent leadership and how to work and build trusting relationships with your families. It's a good one, so tune in and enjoy. Welcome back to Heads and Tails with me, Henry Faber. I'm one of the co-founders here at Opperton, and I'm super excited to have Will Campbell tuning in all the way from New York today. How are you, Will?
Doing really well. As I just mentioned, it's more like a London summer day here. It's raining constantly, but very excited to join you today.
And here in England, we've had 6 weeks of the best weather we've ever had on record, so how times are changing. A little intro on Will before we get going, because some of us here in our English network may not have heard of him before or come across this school, and it's going to be a really unique story for everyone today. I'm excited. So from Sydney, where Will hails from initially, via a master's at Wollongong, one of the best named universities I've ever heard of, all the way to New York City, Will Campbell has forged a career that has been education through and through. He's had roles at the Australian College of Physical Education, 4 years at Trinity Grammar. He was leading on IB work, directing rugby, coaching. He finds himself moving to New York City and climbing into senior leadership at Dwight, the network of Dwight schools that I'm sure everyone's aware of, before founding within Dwight, Franklin School, just across the Hudson River in New Jersey. Now, I've been to Franklin, and it is an unbelievable place. Will is bringing the best of the Dwight Schools network into a wholly new and innovative place of its own, leading the school and also chairing the Franklin Foundation. Now, I'll spare more info on the school itself for Will to explain it, but needless to say, thank you for tuning in to record with me all the way from the last couple of weeks of term in New York, and we're really looking forward to a chat. Thank you.
Yeah, really excited to dive in. Love the work that you guys are doing, but also it was great when you came and had a visit to kind of just dive a little deeper into what we're managing to achieve here at Franklin. And look, that bell's going to keep happening. We just say that it's the noise of a new learning experience. So
You're on the front line. You're at the coalface. That's good. We know you're in a real school at least. That's good. You're doing your job. I think first and foremost, I just want to ask you how you're doing what you're doing, because in really simple terms, sparing a longer story, Franklin's operating at half the price of its competitor schools in New York in the Manhattan area. How are you doing that, and how is that innovation taking shape?
yeah, look, it's a really interesting one. You referenced the network of schools. So that's a huge advantage for us as a starting point or a platform that we've nearly got it's over 150 years now of experience. And the Dwight Network is kind of synonymous with, forward-thinking, innovative approaches. They are an IB school, but they also kind of push into entrepreneurial spaces and have done for the best part of kind of 2 decades. And so we had a really good platform to be able to push off from. But I think one of the things that's been a real advantage as well is the trust that the leadership group over there had in me and then had in our team once we had created a fantastic team, was to really look at diving into how we can provide, I think, a superior experience. We talk about it being aligned with many of the Manhattan schools. I actually think we do offer a superior experience in a number of spaces. And we've been able to do so because we had a bit of time that most schools don't have. So I had nearly 18 months to deep dive into all of the schools that were on the leading edge, but also I'm big on not necessarily asking for help, but can you teach me? How can I learn more? And so I got into a lot of great spaces, had a number of awesome mentors, but also just people willing to have an impact on education that had no affiliation with our school. So asking, reviewing, reflecting, researching was probably the best part of that 18-month period. And then I would say just really looking at things that schools aspire to that normally get kind of blocked off with due to their tradition and history. And for us, one of those things is just really looking at operational excellence. So I think one of the biggest things with schools is that you will have certain pods or sections of schools that are absolutely thriving. And there's a couple of really difficult rub areas. And those rub areas tend to actually prevent you from taking those initial steps or even the next steps to offer innovative programs or hire different teachers or even just change the infrastructure of delivery of your curriculum. So we really looked at operational excellence. I had a great opportunity that you mentioned at Trinity and also at ACPE. I rubbed shoulders with the elite of the elite when it came to education and research at a very, very young age. And so being able to learn from them and implement things that they wish they could have done in their own settings was a massive advantage. And then I think the other thing is investing in the team that you are creating beyond just understanding their professional ability is actually just get to know them, warts and all, um, and then create a school where you're actually utilizing and leveraging their strengths and then making sure that they're aware that the development that they need in their weaknesses is actually something that we are aspiring to do for our students. So I think just creating that ecosystem of recognition, putting people in the right spaces, and then trusting them to do their job, knowing that if they make a mistake, we already know where some of their faults might come from. And then I've just got an awesome team, and we've got a really amazing community of students and parents as well that were willing to kind of walk towards the fire of a new school, a bit of a new philosophy. And they've, look, to be honest, I think they've been paid back in spades. So it's all kind of worked out really, really well.
When I came to see you, I felt there was almost like an entrepreneurial energy in what you were able to do, very different from a lot of school heads I speak to in terms of the framework and the bureaucracy and the red tape that's already in place from their years of history and tradition. Has that been very freeing to have this kind of blank canvas? I'm sure it's been exhausting too, but where have been the kind of the big ticks and the big crosses, I suppose, the pros and the cons of that kind of a blank slate?
Yeah, I think I'll go to the exhausting part first so people understand. I think if you're an educator and education is something that kind of gives you those goosebumps, you also let yourself find new ways to be even more exhausted. So I think there's a lot of self-inflicted stuff as well that comes with one being a lead, but also being in a space where you do have that autonomy you referenced. I think going back to being in leadership where I had all of that red tape was a massive advantage. So being a dean of faculty at 28, and I was in the room with people that are tenured, had ridiculous number of research papers. We were opening new sections of the university as well, the college, and then also being at Trinity Grammar, and then also at Dwight, is they have so much red tape and they do an incredible job of getting around that red tape or manipulating it. But to actually have so much freedom allowed us to look at things that I think, like you referenced, were more entrepreneurial, or they were just areas where we didn't have to worry so much about what the consequences might be if we didn't get it right. And so I think one of the big things that we looked at is value add investment. So much of what schools do, they work on budgets to kind of just resource certain areas so that that particular area works. And so what we kind of looked at was looking at kind of projections and anticipating where education was going to, and then investing in what that value add projection might look like. So that's like professional development. We have professional development for our faculty and our staff, and it's 2 periods, 100 minutes per week. That's actually a part of their load. And that's a huge financial investment. It's not so much the dollars that you're losing, it's the fact that you have to be really kind of innovative in your schedule, ensure that you're putting the right teams together. But I also think leveraging external relationships, knowing that we were able to do that because we didn't have any historical partnerships to begin with, was also a huge advantage. So being able to bring in different organizations and industries that don't typically work with high schools or schools in general, I think that was a massive advantage for us. So yeah, the clean slate, the freedom, the autonomy, and then also the resilience. I think referencing failure a fair bit, being able to provide an environment where the faculty and the team knew that I was okay with them making mistakes, and that as long as we're resilient and we're working towards our mission and vision, we're going to get it right. There just might be a few little road bumps along the way. We've just been unfortunate so far. We've had very few road bumps, but I'm sure they're to come at some stage, and we've just really built a team to, I think, just get ready for it.
Well, I guess if they're not roadblocks or road bumps, what are the challenges? There's an in tray on your desk, and obviously a long summer ahead, where I hope for the first time in years, probably since COVID, you're going to get a holiday of some description. But if there's a physical or metaphorical in tray sitting in front of you, what's one big challenge you're happy to share with us that is both a threat and an opportunity that you're excited to tackle?
I think because of the mentality of most startups is that there's a lot of risk assessment, but there's also a lot of risk taking at the same time. And so it's the balance between the opportunity that's right there available to take now versus the opportunity that might be better to take in 6 months or a year's time. And so I think in the in-trade at the moment, because we're doing so well, we're getting incredible opportunities offered to us by leading universities locally and around the world, different businesses, different spark or innovation kind of incubator programs. And then I think the biggest thing for me is really making sure that I include the team and the wider stakeholder information on one, trying to produce and provide what everyone wants and needs now. But that relationship might not be advantageous for the school in 4 years' time. So I think it's just the balancing act is probably the exciting part of my inbox or my intro. But I would say the biggest opportunity for us is growth, and making sure, obviously, because in this kind of role, I'm probably functioning as an entrepreneur, a CEO, and an executive principal more so than just what you classify as your standard kind of day-to-day operational and a little bit of strategic thinking and thought, and then some future planning. So I'd say the balancing, the listening, and then having the confidence to know that whatever decision I make, I've got a great team that's, walking alongside me that's willing to do what it takes for that decision to then to come to fruition. But I would just say balancing of opportunity more so than one specific one.
Exciting. How exciting. I want to zoom out a little bit before we go probably back into Franklin in more detail. The US, it's a nuts place. A lot of the people listening to this podcast are probably not based in the US. In fact, I know the majority are probably based in the UK and Europe. You are part of several microcosms. One is international education more broadly, and it's amazing actually what Franklin's managing to do in punching internationally. I think that's really cool. But within the US market, let's call it, you're part of the national education scene, and then you're part of this very funny, strange microcosm, which is New York City private education. Perhaps you could reflect briefly on both of those, coming from Australia as an outsider. Like, what's your take?
Look, look, even bouncing out of COVID, I think everyone realized that the world is a much smaller place now. And we need to understand each other better. I would say that having come from Australia in a school network where it was an all boys school, very, very successful academically, had all of the resources, it's still very much like it's collaborative, but still very much dog eat dog, because you're competing for, a network of students that you want to come in and understand the culture, etc. Then moving to New York, moving into the Dwight network as well, is just how similar things can be, but how many different ways people are trying to go at the same thing. And I would say the kind of pressure that puts on the students and the families to make the right decision, knowing that it is so incredibly competitive for students from largely like 6th grade to 7th grade, is the difference that I would say from, obviously we've spoken before, my family's originally from the UK. I actually went to school in the UK for a while. I actually was really fortunate to do some summer programs while I was playing a bit of sport over there as well at one of the leading schools in Edinburgh. And there's an element of peak and trough for the students. Like there's pressure when it comes to assessment, but there's an ability to just be a kid. And I know that's kind of ramping up even more in the UK now, but there's a real focus of peak for performance in Australia and the UK, which is that kind of 11th, 12th, and 13th grade in the UK. Whereas at the US, it's almost sustained pressure. And I would say that with the communities knowing that, there is this real push in America around rigor and challenge and complexity of the curriculum and portfolio building from such a young age. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that I've got my head around is how integral mentoring, well-being, and also just self-awareness programs are for students, because they're taking on the pressures that we expect ourselves to develop into once we're in the workspace or as we become young adults. And we're actually expecting our students to be resilient and understand how to manage that and submit things on time and be a person of good character. And so I think that's one of the things that I've really got to understand over the last 6 years. And I think we're doing a great job of it here, but it's definitely an area of concern for me. I think that education, I just listened to your recent podcast. I really like the idea of that education is transformational. It's that idea of you're learning about yourself, you're learning about your learning, you're learning how to learn, and you're learning about the future. But at the same time, I don't think we're giving students and kids enough time to be kids. I think that a lot of this can actually be peeled back a little bit more laser focused and a little bit more strategic than just more. And I feel that we're doing a lot in education to put more on kids' plates, but not provide them the skill development to deal with the more.
Mm. Kids at Franklin are going through their school experience with you and hoping to go to top colleges in the US and probably other countries as well. But focusing on the US, it has a system, I suppose, that requires more from students in their preparation earlier and earlier. And part of that feels to me from afar very character led, very, very mentorable, very much like how do I know myself as a person, learn how to express that much earlier and in a more holistic way than perhaps the UK UCAS system where we write 500 words on why we want to study Latin and Greek. Do you like that university application process? Do you think it has a positive impact on the kids who are going through high school, or would you, throw it out the car window and start again if you could?
I don't you look. I'm kind of one of those people that if you can make it, even if it's great and you can make it better, make it better. I do think there's some real significant faults in the structure of the system, and when we look at the OECD's recent results as well, the impact of social and emotional challenges for students that are also heavily connected to socioeconomic status is still an ongoing challenge in education that I think hasn't been fixed, and I can't see it being fixed in the foreseeable future. But I think I would love, and we've been doing it here recently, I would love for the focus to be on the programs, on capabilities and competencies, rather than just the hoodie. I think there's a real aspiration to tell everyone where you go to college rather than seeing the college as the best place for you to develop or learn about yourself, or it might be the best program. But I also think the educational experiences that are in the US at these colleges are outstanding. I think some of them are unrivaled, but I also think that there's a real push that everyone should go to college. Now, the way that I look at that is I think that you can see more and more colleges are starting to really struggle with numbers. And I think that because the world is telling us that you don't necessarily need to go to college if that program isn't really going to add much to you other than debt. And if the employability of the program that you're in is actually really quite low compared to somewhere else, it may be an advantage for you to punch out 4 years of climbing the ladder, understanding the business in and out, and then maybe make those next steps. But I also think, to your previous point, that's why when you and I connected in Dubai, I thought it was an incredible opportunity for the US to experience a program like yours, because there isn't, I referenced before, there isn't enough time for the students to go through these programs unless there's a structured program that can be plug and play for them. Because it's build a profile in ninth grade, solve a medical challenge, start a club, build an investment that's $5 million. And this is all before the students even get the yes or no from college. And then the parents are aware that that's the narrative. So the pressure is starting even earlier than it needs to be at home. And so for me, I would say, I think that there is still an absolute need for tertiary education. I think the learning that comes from it, the development, the autonomy, the independence, the routine building, I think is really important. But I also know that there are so many alternatives out there for students that could thrive in a different setting and in a different way. And they therefore ultimately have a better future. And that for me is why I'm in education. Is I want to see the student that sees me in 10 years' time that talks about that they made the right decision, or they've grown into this role, that they love turning up to work every day, and it's managed to give them enough money to love and enjoy their life. And if they're fortunate enough that that bank balance is insane, then they can also do some additional stuff. But I think for me, the love of your life, the love of learning, and then the love of being, around other people, I think is something that you should aspire to in life in general.
Beautifully put. I think that was a lovely segment. Thank you, Will, very much. As you know, I always ask people to give us an unpopular or controversial opinion. We've had everything from seismic, political commentary through to someone saying that, dogs were loved more than humans, and that was a That was a great shame. So I'm going to give you your moment on the soapbox and would love to hear what is your unpopular or controversial opinion you're happy to stand up behind.
Look, I don't know how controversial it will be, but I think one of the things that I think needs to be developed more is parent leadership. Um, we talk, especially at the moment, phone policies, banning of phones. Phones are so toxic. I think all of that has great relevance. There is so much research behind it. We ban phones at our school other than for security measures. But I think that it's very difficult to create a pattern, a routine, and a system for students to thrive in when, as soon as they go home, they're allowed complete access to that device that we're meant to be banning because it's so toxic and so bad. And then I also think in leadership at the moment, I think the head role is becoming more and more complex. You've got to be a person that understands organizational excellence, financial acumen, risk management. You've got to be a person that walks towards a fire but can also put it out. You've got to have intra and interpersonal skills that are considered elite. And then at the same time, you're getting asked the question, can you teach my son to turn up on time? Can you teach my son to talk to me nicer at home? Can you teach my daughter to not yell at me when I ask her to start her homework? And so I think there's a lot of different lenses. And I think the controversial part of it is parenting is so different. It is so complex because each student is different and each house is different and each ecosystem is different. But I think there's some fundamental responsibilities that parents are pushing off onto schools now that I think would allow for a more harmonious relationship between all of the stakeholders if there is a little bit more parent education and research. Barker College, which is in Australia, they've actually launched a program. They've got an incredible research program, the Barker Institute it's called. I have no affiliation with them. They used to be a rival when we were at Trinity. But the level of detail that they've gone into to use research as a learning tool for all in their community, I think is really commendable.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, I had one head say to me the other day, the parent contract is broken and has been since COVID, and parents are getting younger and the relationship with their children is changing in terms of the desire to be the best friend and the ally to that child, and to avoid, if possible, having to be the disciplinarian or the enforcer. What's your technique? What's your advice for other heads and leaders out there in how to manage their parent demographics well? And I ask that given you're working in New York City, definitely somewhere with a reputation for having some of the toughest parents in the world. So
Yeah. Look, I should preface this as saying I actually have and have historically had incredible relationships with nearly every family that I've come in contact with, but it's due to the amount of investment that I put in prior to that relationship being developed on the student. Whether it was in a classroom when I was really young, whether it was a middle leader, whether it was being a leader in multiple environments across different ecosystems as well. I even said it with the faculty and the staff. It's like you need to get an understanding of people, warts and all. So you need to understand what their rub areas are. You need to understand their complexities. I can say that probably in this setting alone, I have a really great relationship with our director of admissions. We've actually done, I would say, I think I've done 97 to 98% of every interview or interaction, and it's caused me plenty of grace. And it's a huge investment in time. But before anyone comes into the building, through our events and through that admissions process, we've probably spent anywhere between an hour and 3 hours with each of those families, sometimes in a massive setting. But I would say the approach is I don't think that you can lead others, and I don't think you can lead communication with other people until you really understand the systems that they have to work in at home and their perspectives on the things that are going to create the tension. So in America, it's the political understanding is really important. The religious aspects, even though we're not a religious school, just understanding the diverse perspectives and the historical experiences. And then I think it's doing research in the communities of where your community comes from. And that's very, very time consuming, but I think it's one of those things that the relationship is built on a real core trust aspect because they know that you've tried to understand who they are. And then the difficult conversations I think, become way easier because they know that you're coming from an area of care, empathy, and compassion, but you're also coming from an area of the school is essentially my family. Everyone that's in it is a part of my family, and therefore I have to protect the family and everything that's in it. So a difficult conversation will have to be had if it has to be had.
That's lovely. I think it's a really good place for us to finish, to be honest. That's wonderful advice broadly to educators, but also to anyone working with families and children. How to not deal with people, but how to, I mean, really give the most of yourself to those people. And I think it sounds like you must have an incredibly busy diary from what I can tell. But what an exciting journey to have been a part of in founding a school and leading a school in such an interesting place as New York City. So we'll really appreciate all the time and the wisdom you shared with us today, as eloquent as expected. And we wish you well for a summer break ahead. And by the time people are listening to this, we can probably imagine you in on the shores of Europe enjoying a little time with your kids. Much earned. So thank you.
Yeah, look, thanks so much. Like I said at the start, love everything that you're doing. I think it's going to be a great addition to the New York landscape if you can break into all of those spaces. Yes, I have an incredible team, like I suggested, who is going to hopefully give me some space and I can do a bit of kind of recovery and re-energizing for the start of the new year. So yeah, very much looking forward to that summer break.
Well, thank you very much. We hope to have you back very soon.
Thank you.